Ohio. At the state with a presidential government, unitary state system and democratic regime. It is located in Central America on Isthmus of Panama between the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. Borders on Costa Rica in the north and Colombia in the south. In language of Indians of the local tribe of Apuvit is the name. It is possible to translate as, the place where there is a lot of fish. The capital, Panama. Official language, Spanish. The climate is subequatorial. From May to January, a rainy season. From January to May, a dry season. Relief, mainly abrupt and even mountains and plains. The highest point, the volcano Barra, 3475 m, which is in the province of Chiriquí. Natural resources, copper, wood, seafood, is available. A possibility of construction of hydroelectric power stations. The woods occupy 44% of the territory of the country. 2010. In the territory of Panama, climate subequatorial, hot and damp. Intra-annual amplitudes of temperatures are small. Average monthly temperatures on the coasts of 25-28 C. Daily temperature differences make 6-8 C. Constantly high relative air humidity, 80%. In mountains, the vertical climatic zonality is shown. Higher than 700 m average monthly temperatures decrease up to 18-20 C. The average annual sums of rainfall on northern slopes of mountains and on the coast of the Caribbean Sea are 2,500-3,500. Rainfall is plentiful during over a year, a maximum from April to December. In the southwest to 1,500-2,000. In January-March the dry season is expressed. The territory of modern Panama was populated with not numerous Indian tribes Cuna and Gayam. In the south there was Coco's culture with the developed traditions of production of metal objects and ceramics. The first contacts with Europeans took place in 1501 with Spaniard Rodrigo de Bastardasam. In 1502 Christopher Columbus explored the east coast of Panama in the fort swimming in New World. In 1513 Vasco Núñez de Balboa passed Isthmus of Panama and became the first European who saw the Pacific Ocean from the east. In 1510 he founded colony and became the governor of the region. Soon became Portobello the place of a transportation of gold of Inca to Europe, attracting the English pirates to these places. The African slaves were delivered. In 1519 future capital of the country, the city of Panama was founded. The English pirate Henry Morgan, who became then the governor of Jamaica, several times plundered Portobello and, in 1671, the city of Panama. It is interesting as well the short history of the Scottish colonial presence in Panama. In 1696 about 2,500 Scottish immigrants founded trade colony in Darien. Due to the lack of the support promised by British and a lack of experience, the Scottish colony experienced difficulties. Fatal for her was a decision on hiring in 1699 of one of the Jamaican corsairs for the attacks of the Spanish trade caravans. In response to Darien, the forwarding case of Spain attacked and forever expelled Scots from Panama. With decline of the Spanish Empire of Panama, I lost the value. In 1821 the country announced independence of Spain and was a part of Great Colombia of Simon Bolivar. National economy was backward, but interest in transportations through Panama increased in the 1850s, after detection of gold in California again. The railroad was paved. In 1879 construction of the Panama Canal, which had to connect Quiet and Atlantic Oceans, begins the French Company. Bankruptcy of the company suspended construction of the channel in 1889. On an initiative and with direct support of the USA in the northwest areas of Colombia, disorders flashed, and the province Panama declared independence of Colombia in 1903. The canal and the earth near the channel is given for control of the United States of America. During the period from 1904 to 1914 the channel was completed under the leadership of the Officer of Engineering Troops of United States Army George Washington of Goethals. On construction, the cheap labor, generally black population of the Antilles, Barbados, the British Western India, which was hired by the American recruiters, was used, seducing with the high earnings which appeared under a number of certificates, not such high. Demonstrations and revolts broke out against control of the USA over the channel in 1927 and also in 1947, 1959 and 1964. In 1940 Arnulfo Arias, who was displaced from this position in a year, became the president. He seized power in the hands in 1949 and was overthrown in 1951. José Antonio Riemann, elected the president in 1952, was killed in 1955. Then this post was held by Ernesto Affairs Gardia. His coming was followed by a short series of the constitutional governments. In 1960 the presidential chair was received by Roberto Chiari, in 1964 this post was held by Marco Robles, and in 1968 for the third time Arnulfo Arias, who was overthrown in 11 days as a result of a bloodless military coup. The created military junta was headed by two colonels famous for the conservative views: José María Pinilla Fabregasam, since 1960 the Deputy Commander National Guard, and Bolivar Arusha, the Commander of National Guard since October 1968. Other edicts of junta which were its part on position of ministers were connected with large business, were dismissed. National Assembly and political parties are banned. On February 25, 1969 in the most National Guard there was a revolution. Leaders of a conservative wing and supporters of dictatorship were dismissed from army and deported in the USA. The real power passed to one of organizers of a revolution on October 11 to the Colonel Omar Torrijos. On December 15, 1969 the attempt of a pro-American revolution headed by Colonels José María Pinilla Fabregasam, R. Silveira and A. Senker took place, however, thanks to personal courage of Omar Torrijos, who came back from abroad to the country on the same day, and A.M. Noriega, who actively supported in the mutiny, failed. The National Corporation on Production of Sugar was created. 5 countries' first sugar plants are constructed. The hydroelectric power station on the Bayana River is constructed. In the country the network of banks developed.
In 1970, when the new Code about Work, which granted the expanded rights to workers and labor unions in defending economic requirements and reduced working week till 40 o'clock, and also established the guaranteed right for strikes, a possibility of participation in profits of the enterprises, a salary minimum, the 13th salary, and protection against unreasonable dismissals is adopted.
For the first time in the country, Massachusetts housing construction for low-paid categories of the population began.
The country leaders allowed to turn Panama into the international financial center.
In the 70s, about 50 large banks worked in the country already.
The average annual income of the Panamanian became higher than in any country of Latin America. Broad support of Panamanians was got by such actions of the government of O. Torrijos's tax reform, reorganization of an education system. Universal primary education is entered. And healthcare, the agrarian reform. Based on use of the Zaleshny and empty government-controlled lands. Strengthening of the role of labor unions with introduction of the principle of obligatory membership in them. During reform of an education system by 1978, one of the best achievements in Latin America was reached. Any school student didn't need to reach school longer than half an hour of walking. Education up to 9 years became not only free, but also obligatory. 98% of children of school age attended schools. By 4 times the number of students grew up. 12% of nationwide expenses were allocated for health care. Expenses on health care grew from $11.7 to $17 a year. The specialized medical center relied on each 10,000 population. It was set in motion to actually frozen agrarian reform of 1962, and long non-payment of taxes began to be qualified as refusal of the owner of the earth, and the government acquired the right for transfer to her peasants. In 1969, 1971, 73,000 hectares were so transferred. On the expropriated lands, over 250 cooperative farms were created. Gave in 1971% of national production of grain, 3 years later already 30%, and income in them exceeded level of income of loaner peasants by 4-5 times. Powerful trade union associations were in a short space of time created. The main thing, the National Center of Workers, I totaled 40,000 dicks. The active policy in the field of elimination of illiteracy led to the fact that if in 1968 illiterate in the country there were about 35%, then in 1978, according to O. Torrijos, at one child in Panama more than a half an hour of walking didn't leave on the road to school. Education up to 9 years became obligatory and free. The number of school students grew up by 5 times, mainly at the expense of the schools focused on training in the future of experts for the industry, transport and agriculture. 3 times the nomenclature of professions at the University of Panama grew, his branches in provinces appeared, the number of students grew up by 4 times. Textbooks were issued free of charge. The Ministry of Health was for the first time created. About 12% of the public expenditures were allocated for needs of medicine. The specialized medical center relied on each 10,000 people. Child mortality dropped from 44 by 1,000 been born up to 24 people. Over time, Torrijos's popularity among the people grew at the expense of socially oriented policy and populist performances. During this period, broad construction of roads, bridges, houses is noted. Agrarian reform is undertaken, though the country got into big debts. Quickly education and healthcare developed. There took place nationalization of a number of the North American companies and the new enterprises are constructed.
Torrijos's government took the measures directed to strengthening of national sovereignty of the country.
On elections to the National Assembly. No. On August 6, 1972 at an appearance of 89%. Torrijos's supporters received 350 places, the left-wing parties, including communists and their supporters, -60, right-wing parties -50, independent -44, the Democratisna -1. Now had the right to consider laws, to make changes to them, to accept and reject them, to adopt amendments to the Constitution, to ratify or reject the international contracts. Now acquired the right to elect the president and the vice president of the country.
However, the right of a legislative initiative remained behind the National Legislative Council, which members were appointed presidents of the country and the chairman of NA. At the first session on, the president of the country, Demetrios Lakas, was elected on October 12, 1972. The new constitution strictly forbade to alienate the national territory under any pretext and entered institute of a national plebiscite for the adoption of the major international treaties.
In particular, the concerning existing or new interasin channels. The voting qualification was reduced from 21 to 18 years.
Article 2 of the new constitution obliged the executive, legislative and judicial authorities to work in harmonious cooperation among themselves and with armed forces of the country. The National Guard acquired legitimate right of participation in political life of the country.
The right of the state for a public sector and economic activity was proclaimed. Temporary. For 6 years.
Article conferred practically all supreme power and powers to O.
Torrijos, the supreme leader of the Panama Revolution.
On September 7, 1977, the agreement on the full channel broadcast from jurisdiction of the USA to the government of Panama at the end of 1999 was reached.
Began on October 1, 1979.
In July 1981, Torrijos died in plane crash under the suspicious circumstances which aren't excluding a possibility of murder.
His colleague, the Colonel Manuel Noriega, came to the power.
In the next decade, Noriega, from a post of the commander of National Guard, de facto directed the country, though visibility of democracy was observed and presidential elections were regularly held. In 1988, the American court brought to Noriega charge of participation in transportation of drugs, and the USA began to make attempts to strip of power Noriega.
In 1989, Noriega cancelled results of May presidential elections and declared Francisco Rodriguez as president, having dispersed protests. Nowadays existing official version of the USA claims that the opposition candidate collected twice more votes than Noriega's protégé. The attempt of group of officers of the Panama Army with assistance of the USA to organize a putsch for the purpose of Noriega's overthrow from a post of the commander-in-chief in October 1989 failed. Almost all organizers were arrested and executed. Also, dicks of their families and family of sympathizers were subjected to persecution. Some managed to flee to the USA.
On December 15, 1989, the legislature of Panama declared Noriega the president and announced a state of war with the USA.
On the same day in the country, one American serviceman was killed. On December 20, 1989 the USA began the military operation against Panama. Noriega was overthrown. On his place Guillermo Andara, brought from the USA, is put.
In 1994 the former colleague of Torrijos, the Minister of Finance in his government Ernesto Pérez Valladares, was elected the president.
At Valladares the principles of the free market were preached, the electric and telephone companies were privatized, and Panama joined WTO.
At the end of board Valladares lost a referendum on an occasion of the second term about 1-2 to what the reason call unpopularity of his neoliberal inventions. In 1999 the widow of the ex-president Arnulfo Arias Miri Moscoso Rodriguez, who later lost a competition for this post in 2004, was elected the president. Her program was ambitious, but there were difficulties with the embodiment, as in Legislative Assembly her party had no majority.
In 2004 the position of the president was held by Martin Torrijos Espino, the son of the General Torrijos, who was already running for president in 1999. His arrival on this post confirmed interesting regularity. The loser in Panama wins the following at presidential elections. Torrijos acted on conditionally social democratic platform and offered all and to everyone to join the social pact against poverty, for social justice and prosperity. In the latest time protests and social performances against the neoliberal reforms. Especially noticeable in August 2001, in September 2003 and May-June 2005. Became a noticeable trend in the Panama life. On May 3, 2009 there took place presidential and parliamentary elections in which Ricardo Martinelli, the candidate of the Liberal Party, Democratic Choice, was elected the new president. On a general election on May 4, 2014, Juan Carlos Varela was elected from Panamistski Party the president, and in National Assembly Democratic Change parties, Revolutionary Democratic and Panamistski became leading parties. Panama in the administrative relation is divided into 10 provinces. Provincias in singular, provincia. And 3 autonomous regions. A comarca. Comarca indigena. 2 more comarca are a part of provinces and thus are hierarchically equivalent to districts. Distrito. Panama, the unitary state. The constitution is adopted. The form of government, the presidential republic. Type of state system, the democratic republic. The head of state and the government, the president. Now the post of the president is held by Laurentino Cortizo. The cabinet is appointed by the president and the vice president are elected universal suffrage each 5 years. Legislature, unicameral National Assembly minus 71 deputies, are chosen the population for a 5-year term.
Following the results of elections in May 2019 in National Assembly, the following parties are represented.
Revolutionary Democratic Party, left centrist, 35 places in National Assembly. Democratic Change, liberal and conservative, 18 places. Panamistski Party. The former National and Revolutionary, former Arnulfoskaya. Conservative and Nationalist, 8 places. The Liberal Republican National Movement. Milirana. Right centrist, 5 places. The remaining 5 places in National Assembly were taken by independent politicians. In the country, some more legal parties and the movements which aren't represented in parliament are registered. The economy of Panama is based on operation of the Panama Canal and also on banking, insurance business, registration of courts under the flag of the country, and tourism. These industries make about 2/3 of GDP of Panama, about 2/3 of working are engaged in them. The GDP per capita in 2012-15. $6,000. The 63rd place in the world. The industry gives about 17% of GDP. 18% working or occupied. And agriculture about 6% of GDP. 15% working or occupied. The main crops: bananas, rice, corn, coffee, sugarcane, vegetables. The cattle gets divorced. Industries: construction, brewing, cement and other building materials, production of granulated sugar, oil refining. Export -$3.06 billion. In 2017. Oil products 21%. Tar 9.9%. Bananas 9.8%. Vessels 5.1%. And also coffee, gold, shrimps, etc. Food products. Main buyers: Ecuador 28%, Netherlands 9.8%, USA 8.1%, South Korea 4.3%. Import -$24.8 billion. In 2017. Crude oil and oil products 33%. Products of mechanical engineering 14%. Chemical goods including drugs 12.7%. Vehicles including vessels 11.1%. Textiles 5.8%. Main suppliers: China 24%, USA 19%, Colombia 10%, South Korea 6.6%. The Panama currency, Balboa, was entered since 1903, after separation from Colombia. However, the Balboa is a little put into practice. Panama has own stamping, but as paper currency US dollars are used.
In Panama, coins with a maximum advantage of 5 balboas and also 1 balboa and smaller. Since 1934, the rate of balboa is firmly tied to United States dollar in the ratio 1.
Are minted.
Panama was the first of 3 countries of Latin America which came to dollarization.
There were Dollarizirvana, Ecuador and El Salvador later. In 2010 the country was visited by 1.7 million tourists, that is the highest rate and 12% more than in 2009. Since 2009 in Panama the Trans-Panama Track develops.
Trans-Panama Trail, a pedestrian tourist route 1127 km which passes through the whole country from border with Colombia to border with Costa Rica.
Population -4.2 million. 2020. Annual gain -1.5%. Fertility -2.5 births on the woman. According to the average forecast, the population of the country by 2100 will make -3.9 million people. Contamination: a virus of an immunodeficiency. HIV -1%. The 53rd place in the world assessment for 2007. People. Birth rate -20.18 per mil. The 96th place in the world. Mortality -4.66 per mil. The 196th place in the world. Infantile mortality 12.67 on 1,000 newborns. The 139th place. Average life expectancy -77.25 years. 74.47 years at men, 80.16 years at women. Share of urban population -73%. KSC. Population density 48. 5 people/square. Came. 2013.
Separately from Panamanians, it is necessary to consider Americans, the citizens of the USA living compactly mainly around a zone of the Panama Canal on a constant basis, from whom about 75% are military personnel of the United States Armed Forces,
Army, aircraft, the fleet and Marines.
Americans live together with families separately in the towns which are specially built for their placement, practically without adjoining and without contacting to local population.
Having own administrative bodies, police and other municipal services, schools, churches, shops, entertaining institutions, etc. For many decades such subethnic type as Panama Americanets and so-called 200% Americans was developed.
In this regard, the widespread phenomenon for dicks of families of the American employees in Panama is practiced when for several decades of accommodation there they don't understand word Spanish.
Spanish. Official. French. Owns 18% of the population. English. Owns 14% of the population. Many Panamanians know several languages. Catholics make from 75% to 85% of the population of the country, Protestants, from 15% to 25%. Protestants are divided into believers of the Assemblies of God, Protestant Episcopal Church, Seventh-day Adventist Church, Baptists, Methodologists. About 2% of the population profess Baha'i faith, Jehovah's Witnesses -1.31%, Mormons -1.1%.
Literacy level in the country in 2016 is 94%. That makes Panama the leader in this indicator in the region of Central America.
The index of education made
0.888 for 2007, that belongs to the category of high.
In the country of nearly 100,000 students, the youth studies in 88 higher education institutions. Main higher educational institutions: University of Panama, Technological University of Panama and West Coast University and Latin University and Polytechnical University of Central America, Universidad Santa Maria la Antigua.
The country has no laws on obligatory data storage, and it doesn't consist in alliances 5 and 14 of eyes. Therefore there are some suppliers of VVN
Norton are based. The culture of Panama comes from the European music, art and traditions introduced by Spaniards to Panama. Hegemonic forces created the hybrid forms combining the African and Indian cultures with the European. For example, the Spanish dance with the African rhythms, subjects and dance moves. Folklore varies in each region and is presented by a typical suit, a skirt, traditional food and dishes and also music and dances. Athletes of Panama debuted at the Olympic Games in 1928. The country has no standing army. Come into the public force of the Republic. National Border Service. National Police of Panama. National Air Service. National Sea Service. Service of Institutional Protection. Total number of the armed paramilitary forces is about 12,000 people. Of them 11,000 forces of National Police. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.